Welcome, everyone, to Michigan Birding 101. This is our third in our four-part spring series or late winter, and we are so excited to have you here today. I'm just elated to see in the chat all the things that people have been seeing over the last couple of weeks or the last week or so since we started this class. If you're watching this live, definitely feel free to put in the chat what you've been seeing lately or just share little tidbits. Don't forget that if you're watching this live, there's also a Q&A box, and use the Q&A box to put your questions. We will spend about 15 minutes live at the end. It won't be recorded for Q&A time. So don't forget to put your questions in the Q&A as we go through some awesome stuff today. So let's dive into how we can be part of conserving birds and conserve the birds today in Michigan Birding 101. But before we dive into that, we're going to do a little review. If you remembered our first week, we learned how to observe birds using binoculars. Now, there's a bird on the screen. I don't want you to say what the name of this bird species is. Don't say the name of this bird on the screen yet, but we're going to practice a little review from our first 2 weeks. So one of the first things we learned to do is to use binoculars. If you have your binoculars today, I really want you to grab them and back up from the screen far enough to where you can watch this bird and try watching this bird, because what this is here is this is a recording of a video of a bird. And so this is a little bit different than what we've been doing normally with just static slides. And so it's a little bit harder when the birds start moving. So we're going to practice that today. So if you have your binoculars, practice viewing this bird while I play the video. And then we're going to say in the chat some of our comments about what we noticed before we identify. So don't say the name of the bird species, but you can start putting in the chat things you notice. And we're going to play this. And if you have your binoculars, give it a chance. All right, now this is slow motion, so that helps. But if you want to recall from your first session, make sure your binoculars are adjusted so they're comfortable for your eye and you're seeing a single image. And then what you want to do is see the bird with your naked eyes first, keep your eyes on the bird and raise those binoculars right up and then get that bird in focus there. And I'm seeing some amazing, incredible features, but this bird is tucking its head in, right? You don't always get a perfect view. So what are some features you notice about this bird here? So it's got a cap, maybe red or brown. We're kind of having a hard time seeing the colors there, and that is a really important thing. Colors can be deceiving. I see some other comments coming in about black and white on the back, and a few comments about woodpecker, that this is possibly a woodpecker. Now, I bet what made you probably think it's a woodpecker is part of the way that it's using its beak to kind of nudge in between the bark here and pick out insects. So that's a great observation. This is definitely a woodpecker. We see long beak, yellowish, kind of a yellowish wash around the shoulder. That's a really important one too. All right, so let's head on over to see what this bird is. We know it's a woodpecker, so I'm going to put up the woodpecker section of the Sibley Guide to the Birds. Now, thinking about our features that we noticed, well, it has a colored cap, right? And so that can help us rule out some of these birds that don't have colored caps, or that maybe have full colored heads like these birds here. And so we can rule out a lot of those birds. We're also going to rule out the pileated, since it didn't have that crest, right? And it has those black and white facial streaks, which is a lot of the species. But notice that whole bottom shelf there of woodpeckers does not have red or brownish in that cap. And so that just leaves us a few species, which are mainly the sapsuckers, which do have that yellowish wash in particular that we kind of notice. So looking at the sapsuckers, we see that there are actually two that look very similar, red-naped and yellow-bellied. And if you have a guess for which one this is, go ahead, put it in the chat now at this time. And if you hadn't noticed the range map at the bottom, you probably now looked down there and saw, oh, the red-naped sapsucker is a western species. It would be very, very unusual if we saw it in Michigan. And the yellow-bellied is much more expected. And if you look there too, the yellow-bellied woodpecker is mostly a summer resident. That would be the orange color is summer, yellow is migration, and blue is winter. So although there are every once in a while a few in Michigan in winter, this is a migratory woodpecker that should just be starting to arrive again. And so the yellow-bellied or yellow-bellied sapsucker is back, is what we're seeing here. All right, sorry, I got a little distracted there, and I'm going to keep myself hydrated. Thanks for the comments in the chat there. All right, so yellow-bellied sacksucker is the woodpecker of the summer that is on its way back or might still be back, and that was a great job. Now we're going to try again with another moving bird. We're going to do this one a little quicker. So get your binoculars. If you've got them, go ahead, back up, get ready, keep your eye on the bird, and raise your binoculars. Ready, go. What are you noticing about this bird? Okay, getting in the binoculars. Oh, and it's gone. And that is very much what happens. I'm going to pretend like this bird hopped to the right, and we're going to get one more look at it. Here we go. All right, there's that bird. Start noticing what are some of the key features you notice on this bird here. And that was a very brief look at that bird. Now, that is very realistic. This is more what it's like when you're actually birding. You don't get a lot of time, you don't get slow motion, and sometimes it's just a few seconds. But we do have a few folks saying the yellow right above the beak on the forehead was very noticeable. It's a perching bird. It uses its legs to grasp, and so that kind of puts it in the songbird categories. It has a yellow spot between the eye. The beak is large, but again, large is a relative term. So what does that really tell us? The beak is very triangular. It's stubby. It looks like a heavy bill. Those are some descriptors that kind of add a little bit more. It has kind of that round floofiness to it. It's very rounded bird with a white throat, a very clear white throat and that yellow mark. So that might be just enough if we can get this bird to category. Does anybody know what category of bird this is? Well, I'll just show you. The category of bird is the LBBs, the little brown birds, or the sparrows, as somebody just put into the chat right before I said it. So good job. So the sparrows are a tricky group, but as we talked about last week, if you look at the facial patterns, you can really differentiate them because no two sparrows have the exact same facial patterns. And so we're looking for one with a yellow eye dot. There's the grasshopper sparrow, Savannah sparrow, and the white-throated sparrow all have the yellow eye dot, but the grasshopper sparrow doesn't have a white throat like we talked about, the Savannah and the white-throated. So go ahead and give it your guess in the chat. Which of those two do you think it might be? The Savannah or a white-throated? We got Jerry's thinking it might be white-throated. We got Baby Moose. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. I know you shared it last week. And Pamela in there too. And so now we're kind of getting to maybe a few of you are thinking white-throated, and that is correct because that bird had very black lines between the white and the yellow, as well as gray, as opposed to brown overall. So good job. You just identified a sparrow. If you are totally lost, you're like, that was way too fast. I have no idea what's going on. Don't worry. That is totally expected. If you're a newer beginning birder, that's where you should be. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with not getting to identify every bird. But if you were able to identify that bird as the white-throated sparrow using this chart, hats off to you. And know that the more you practice, the more experience you get, the easier this will come. And getting out and birding, again, is super easy. You can do it anywhere, anytime. And so hopefully you're getting those skills to use and finding some of the tips we gave a little helpful. So that was our review of the first week. Some of our ID skills. Last week, we talked about backyard birds and the different birds specifically you could expect in your backyard. And then we talked about how to feed them. Today, we're going to talk about how to conserve the birds. So our objectives for today. First one, have fun. Get your questions answered and see some cool birds. So that means, don't forget, put your questions in the Q&A. Also, if you've got cool chats, things to share, good resources that are along our topic today, or just something else bird related, please put that in the chat. We love this social aspect of the live shows here, our live class. And then our second objective is to identify specific ways to reduce your impact on birds and to practice good birding ethics. Any kind of hobby that takes place in nature has the potential to do a lot of good for the environment, but it also has the potential to be damaging. And so we want to really make sure that our actions as birders help protect and promote good birding ethics and support a strong birding community. And then lastly, we're going to identify strategies or resources for your backyard. And so we're going to get a little more into the backyard, specifically with the habitat. Those of you shouting out native species, that's what we're going to get into a little bit today. So, and Cindy's going to come on for that last part, as long as I leave her enough time. So let's make sure we do that by getting into our first topic, birding ethics. Now, these two birds, I think, are a great example of why birding ethics might be necessary. The bird on the left He's a great gray owl, one of the rarest North American owls, extremely hard to find. They like to live in bogs, but sometimes they're found in areas where birders can access them, and it can create a lot of hubbub. But there's ways that birders can view these rare owls safely and without impacting the species. And the bird on the right there is the beautiful spruce grouse, or the fool's head, which you can nearly trip over and makes for a really easy bird to not have to disturb because they really don't move around very much at all. So a couple different species that can have impact conflict, but we can minimize that with some of our birding ethics. So there are three key things I want you to remember today when it comes to birding ethics. There is a fairly long and very well, actually, it's only about one page, so it's fairly concise, actually, and really well written code of birding ethics from the American Birding Association. This is a large nonprofit that primarily works in promoting the hobby of birding as well as conservation of birds. But they're really one of the few groups that's solely focused on or largely focused on the hobby of birding. And they put out a great guide for birders on how to make sure we're properly birding. So they really boils down into three things. One, respect and promote birds and their environment. Two, respect and promote the birding community and its individual members. And three, respect and promote the law and the rights of others, aka non-birders. So it's really just about helping the birds, helping birders, and being respectful of those non-birders who we might come across. That's how you can kind of boil it down. So let's get into those three things. I just want to share a couple stories and get through this fairly quick because I don't think these concepts are too difficult to understand or too overly complex. This first one is really, I'm going to start with other birders, the birding community. So I want to say respect and promote the birding community and its individual members. And really what this is just basic human adulting in the form of being kind, understanding that not everyone has the same perspective or the same skill levels as you, and that's okay, and striving to be inclusive. But, adulting has become a lot harder. Ever since COVID, our worlds have been turned upside down, and that makes us more on edge. It makes us more agitated. We don't understand the world around us. But birding is a great place to start to begin to understand the world around you. And as you encounter other birders, you will start to notice that not every birder has the same level of experience. Some of you in this class already are intermediate or advanced birders, and we're so happy to have you here. And hopefully you're getting some good skills or some things you never thought about. But we're also happy you're here because you can help support new birders by sharing resources, good places to bird, and really, one of the best ways to learn how to bird better is to go out with more experienced birders. But if you are an experienced birder, you have to remember to give a lot of grace to new birders. It's not our job to correct everyone every single time. And even if we are correcting people, we can do that in a gentle way. If you're a new and beginning birder, just know that there will be people who know a ton more about you and that, or a ton more about birding than you do. And that's okay. It's okay to be the novice. It's okay to be the newbie. Sometimes when we start a hobby, we feel this pressure to be the best at it or to get our skills up really fast. But remember, this is a hobby. It's not a profession. It's not a competition. It's just about having a good time. So recognize that other birders will know a lot more than you, and that's okay. And strive to learn from them if they're willing to teach and they're not total jerks. All right. Last is to strive to be inclusive. Birding has become a lot more popular. And I think if I was a kid today, I might be able to find other kids that birded. But growing up in the rural Upper Peninsula, I was a very passionate, avid birder, but I had no birding friends. I had knew no one around me that even understood what the hobby was about. And most other kids my age just thought it was really weird that I liked birds so much. But thankfully, my mom, first off, was always super supportive. Of course, supportive parents are great. But what was even more helpful, or what was also helpful in addition, was Michigan Audubon used to do a birding weekend up where I lived. And they took it on themselves, even though I wasn't paying for the weekend, but because I was a young birder who lived there, they just invited me along to start coming with them on their trips. And after a couple years, I started leading trips for them. And I got to know all these other amazing experienced birders, and they told me good places to go bird, and it made me feel like I was part of a community. It's definitely what got me to stay in birding. Even though I was 9, 10 years old, getting made fun of by my friends, I had this core group of folks who would come up every year and really encourage me me in my birding. So just strive to be that inclusive birder who helps make people feel welcome, who helps teach other people. It can really make this world a better place if you take that attitude with you in anything. But the birding community is already a place that really strongly has that. So be one of those folks who carries that on farther. All right, there's my little soapbox. We're moving on. Be nice to other birders, basically. Now, when it comes to non-birders and to respecting the law, there are some ways that birders sometimes get in conflict. And by the way, anybody know what this bird is here? Let me play it for you. You might actually get more confused. Here's the call. Now, if you hear that call, you might be thinking, wait, is that a bald eagle? Because the vast majority of Hollywood movies take the call of this bird that you see the picture of and superimpose it over the bald eagle. If we have any experienced or advanced birders, we do have a few folks that know this is a hawk. Nice job, and Zach as well. And Mark got it. This is a red-tailed hawk. A red-tailed hawk is one of our more common species there. And so that is, a great looking hawk. Now, when you're driving down the road, you might see this hawk up on the side of the road. And what I want you to first think about when it comes to respect the law is road birding, because you might have the instinct to slam on the brakes and pull over and see that bird and start blocking traffic. So, one of the most important things for respecting the law really has to do with road birding. When you see a good bird, make sure you're still going to follow the road laws. Even if you're on a dirt road, don't just park in the middle of the road. That happens up here all the time. Birders park in the middle of the road on a dirt road. They think no one's going to use it, and then a school bus comes down and you can't get around. So just pull over and don't trespass, obviously. Now, that does seem obvious, but if you're not familiar with rural agricultural areas and you end up birding one, do know that farm fields are private lands almost all the time. You cannot just walk into a farm field to get a better picture of an owl. So don't trespass, but that's not too complex, right? Drive safe, follow the law, don't trespass. Okay, so that's not too hard. We got our first one, which was treat other birders with respect. Next is respect and promote the laws and rights of others, including birders. Now, let's do a little sound quiz here. So I'm going to play a call of a bird, and you can throw a guess in the chat, A, B, C, or D, or you could just guess in your head. You don't have to use the chat if you don't want to. If you're watching this recorded, just give it a little guess. But I'm going to play a call of a bird here, and it'll be the main loud call you hear. There are some in the background. And I want to see if you can guess which species this is from this list here. And these are all common backyard birds. So I'm going to give it a play. That was that call right there, that loud. Bonus points if you can identify some of the birds in the background too. Let that keep playing, but I'm seeing some guesses coming through. A, B, D, D, B, D, nuthatch. Someone says nuthatch. All right. Yeah, so there are a lot of birds calling in the background too. You hear that? That sound is probably playing now because it's spring. But yes, I hear a lot of guesses for nuthatch, and the correct guess is the white-breasted nuthatch, number D. They make a pretty distinctive call like that, and once you learn that call, you'll quickly know what nuthatches are around, even if you can't see them. You'll actually be surprised to start hearing this probably in any woods that you get around. Now, I just wanted to play that for a little fun. We're not doing a lot of sound ID practice in this class, but definitely get Merlin, and I did see a few folks got some other of the background birds. Trinity and Carol got the red-winged blackbird singing in the background, as well as Nancy. And Lauren caught the mourning dove in the background. So nice job, folks, catching those other ones. The reason I wanted to play an audio is that audio playback is now very easy. All of us have phones, and it's very easy to pull up the call of a bird on your phone. If you have one of the apps, you can play the call of the app. Now, a lot of times, birders and photographers particularly will play the call of a bird to try to attract that same species in. And, that used to be used pretty often, and there used to not be that many birders, and so it probably wasn't that big of a deal. But now that there is over 20% of U.S. folks are birders, that could really mess up a lot of the birds, because when you use that call, especially in the breeding season, what you're doing is you're tricking that bird into thinking there's another bird in its territory. And so it wants to come in and see what other bird, what other male maybe of its own species is in the territory, and it might be even looking for a fight. It'll get it all worked up and aggressive. And you know, while playing that once or twice might not do anything other than just cause the bird to come over, it might actually cause a bird to abandon a nesting area if it's just shown up, or if it's a young male that doesn't isn't very well established, or it's his first year of breeding. It can actually cause breeding failure, and so you really don't want to play those calls during the breeding season. You also just want to be careful. You know, if you're playing the call, say you see a hidden owl in the daytime and it's hunkered down, and you play the call, or maybe you even think, oh, I bet if I could just get this owl to fly, I could see it better and I could get a picture in flight. So you go down, you break branches, you make some noise, and you try to get that owl to fly. Well, you may have just caused the death of that owl, because owls flying in the daytime are at a high risk of being attacked by crows or ravens or raptors, other raptors like hawks. And because they're seen as competitors, those other birds will sometimes kill an owl. And so it could be very detrimental to make a bird fly. Also, you're just kind of wasting that bird's energy. For owls in particular, that's their night day roost. They're trying to find a place to hide and sleep all day. But even for songbirds, you might cause that bird to go out in the open and to be more in jeopardy of being eaten, or just waste energy. So it's really, if you're viewing the birds, best to never try to disturb them, to try to just watch the bird's behavior for things like it moving, looking aggressive or odd. If you see it starting to act differently, and maybe you're too close, just stop moving or slowly back up, and then move on your day. So yeah, respect the birds. You know, it seems sensical now. You're probably like, oh yeah, I wouldn't scare a bird just to get a better look at it. But once you're in the field and you're like, oh, what is that? I just want to see a little look. And then you're going to be really tempted to start plowing through the brush. Just, you know, stay on the trails. Don't flush the birds. Treat them with some kindness and respect too. Uh, yeah, and those audio lures, again, you know, there is some justification for sparingly using them, but you know, in general, if you don't need to use them, don't use them. If you're just doing it for a hobby, it's a lot less justified than if you're doing it for research or something like that. All right, so yeah, playback, don't make a bird fly. All right, here's another little quiz. You can go ahead and put this into the chat. Which of these two birds do you think is in distress? And this also is not a bird I would expect you to know, but if you happen to be a more advanced birder, or if you just are lucky and you know what species this is, you can throw that in the chat too. But which of these two birds do you think is in distress? And so I'm starting to see some guesses now. Oh, even somebody, Pamela, knew that this is a long-eared owl. Nice job on that guess there. It does kind of look like a great horned owl, but it's a slightly different species. This is a long-eared owl. So it means it's an owl, and this is daytime. And so most of you are guessing that the bird that's alert with its eyes open is actually the bird in distress. Bird A looks like maybe it's in distress, but actually it's just sleeping. So that bird is a perfect example of a bird that's in a day roost and that is not really being disturbed right now. But if you get too close to that owl, or you start making too much noise around it, it may end up looking like B, where its ear tufts go up and they're alert, they're straight up, its eyes are wide. And this is what I was talking about, where you can start to notice birds' behavior. The better you are understanding birds, the better you will be at not disturbing them or causing them stress. So that bird B is in definite stress. And I saw a bird like this once on the college campus of LSSU. It was being harassed by squirrels, and then all of a sudden some crows found it. I kept my distance. No other humans did, but it definitely looked like this, and ended up flying and being chased by two ravens for a while. So yeah, those views are not what you want to see. And if you see folks with pictures like that, you know, maybe don't buy that picture. No, you can get lucky and get the good shots, but ethical birding, ethical photography is what we're going to go for. And remember, owls are a particularly vulnerable group, so give them special care. All right, here's another example of some different bird behaviors you can keep your eye out. So the two photos on the left here, these are birds at rest, right? One's stretching its wing, the other has its head tucked in. So these swans here are at rest. Now, not all behaviors a bird does is going to show you that it's in distress. Things like feeding are a very good sign that that bird is not stressed. A bird generally won't feed unless it feels safe enough to. And so if you see the bird with its head stuck in the mud, well, that's actually just it feeding. Or if it's swimming on the water, looking down at the water, that's again a sign that bird's probably not in stress. You're not causing it any disturbance right now. Once a bird sticks up its head and starts looking around like this, that's a sign that that bird's checking something out, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? When a bird just starts, they move their head all around real jerky like this. Once you start them seeing to do that, that might mean the bird is aware of you. It could be aware of something else. So that is what I like to, kind of call the bird's investigating. Once they hit that investigation pose, you're probably not just unnoticed. They probably noticed you. And then really aggressive behaviors like defending, wings up, or flying away. That's what you don't want to get to, right? So if you see that investigation posture start, maybe back up. You might be a little too close, or take the volume level down. All right. I see a few great guesses, everyone there, and good job. I see a few questions coming in. Don't forget to put your questions in the Q&A if you have them. They'll get lost in that chat. All right. Okay. So last thing I'm going to cover on birding ethics here is it okay to feed the birds? So we took all of last week to have a class and talk about whether or not is it okay to feed the birds, or we told you to feed the birds in your backyard. And so obviously it's fine. Backyard feeders are generally not considered to be harmful for the birds. It's also a myth that if you pull out off your feeders or take away your feeders or don't fill them regularly, birds will starve. No, they will go find new food. It's also a myth that leaving your feeders out in the fall will stop them from migrating. Generally, that's not true. So backyard feeders of songbirds and passive feedings, putting out food and then kind of leaving it there, walking away, as long as you're using proper cleaning and offering food that's healthy for birds, that's generally seen as a positive thing. Now, hand feeding, we did talk about this in the Q&A session last week a little bit, but hand feeding can be seen as questionable depending on the context. So hand feeding songbirds like titmice or chickadees, maybe even things like red-bellied woodpecker, a lot of those species are naturally pretty tame around humans. The first time I went to fill up my bird feeders at home when I bought my house, I went out and I was hearing chickadees around me, and I was filling up my feeders. I was like, I'm just curious. Like, nobody's fed the birds. I live in a really rural area, but I'm going to stick my hand up. And right away, some chickadees came and landed in my hand. And that's because chickadees are adapted to follow around big predators and to kind of mooch off of their kills. They'll eat little bits of fat off of deer kills, or they'll follow around other big predators just to see what might get stirred up. They might follow around large mammals to get the insects they stir up. And so they have some association there, some natural calmness. Other birds, though, like waterfowl, this is where you can start to get into some troubles, particularly with large waterfowl like geese, ducks, or cranes. Habituating those to humans might start to increase the amount of conflict, especially with geese and cranes. The more sandhill cranes we have, the more I'm hearing about conflict there, because these birds can harm a person. A swan is a powerful being, and so when you start feeding these things, hand feeding them, it can habituate them a little too much. So waterfowl in generally don't feed, and bread is in particular not a great thing to feed birds. It can cause damage to their wing structure, and it's not really something their bodies are adapted to eat, even though they will eat it. So yeah, just be very sensitive and careful and make sure you're feeding the right things. Another one that you want to probably just avoid altogether is feeding raptors. There are some people that will use live mice to lure owls in to get better pictures, and this is generally today considered unethical. There's really nothing ethical about that. People will bait raptors sometimes for the purpose of research or to capture them to then be able to take blood samples or things like that, or put radio collars on them, or backpacks, I should say. And that's okay, but baiting raptors for a hobby is not considered okay anymore. So that's it for birding ethics. It's not that complex, right? Be nice to birders, be respectful of the laws and of non-birders, and be great to the birds. But one thing you might have picked up on me saying is make sure you understand the birds and its needs, because birds are not humans. Okay, this is one of the hardest things I think for new birders and even experienced birders to grasp, is that our needs are not the same as a bird's needs, right? Like we might see a bird out in the cold in winter and think that bird needs to be saved. We better go get it, bring it inside. But birds are adapted to handle those cold conditions, and so just be aware that birds do not have the same needs as us. And remember that opinions are like flies; they pop up everywhere, and a lot of them are just full of garbage. And I say that because you can get a lot of bad advice these days on places like certain Facebook groups, or just putting it out there and asking your friends, "What are your thoughts?" Try to use reputable sources like Audubon or Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Make sure you check your sources when you get somebody sharing a good bird ID tip or a good bird feeding tip or a good backyard tip. Make sure you check your sources and that those actually are helpful things for the birds. Look for that research-based evidence. All right. Well, that wraps up birding ethics. Oh yeah, somebody said that they knew someone who used to put out deer carcasses with a trail camera to track eagles. I didn't know that was considered unethical. So I'll just want to go back really quick to make sure I emphasize something. Passive feeding is different than baiting something to get it to come in. So some people, will leave their carcasses after they hunt out for eagles, and as long as you're not there when the eagles are coming in, you're not hand feeding, that can be considered okay. Although do check your local laws and listings, as there can be some issues with that. But passive feeding is different than baiting to actively get something to come in. All right, let's move on to our backyards. So that was birding ethics. Now we're going to use the second half hour here to talk a little bit about backyards. In about 10 minutes, Cindy's going to come on. But I want to start with thinking about what threats might there be to birds in our backyard. So I want you to look at this picture here, and then you can open up the chat and start thinking. We're going to give probably like a couple of minutes. I'm going to set a timer to make sure I give you actual time to look at this and think about it. So a couple minutes, start looking, think about where might there be threats to birds in this yard. So let's go through a few of these, but you could keep throwing stuff in the chat too. All right, so a few of the things. One thing that a lot of people, outdoor lights at night, cats, windows that can cause window collisions, maybe insecticides or pesticides in the grass to keep that grass so lush, even though it shouldn't really be growing there, are things like purple loosestrife, which are an invasive species. So yes, there are many potential threats here. All right, so let's go through these. First off, one threat could be, if you're not raking the seeds away or you're not cleaning your bird feeder, even though the bird feeder is a positive thing for most birds, if you're not properly caring for that feeder, you could potentially be spreading disease. So keep it clean. That's the first one. All right, now the second one is consider the cats. Okay, this is a bit of a controversial area in the fact that a lot of people just love to have outdoor cats, but there's really no controversy when it comes to the research. The research shows that cats outdoors kill upwards of 2 billion birds in the US every single year. And that does not just mean feral cats, even though they are a big part of that. Also indoor cats, even indoor cats with bells on their neck have been shown to still be able to successfully hunt and kill birds. Cats generally are considered an invasive species these days if they are not inside of a house. And so just try, if you're as all possible, to keep your cats indoors. That would be the second one. It's actually a lot better for the health of the cat too. They're going to live a much longer life. They're not going to be eaten by a coyote, which live in all sorts of places, even urban areas, or foxes. And so it's safer for your cat, and it's a lot better for the birds too. All right, now if you have a cat outside already, I do understand that can be hard. Just switch them around, but consider things like catios or cat leashes, which can work actually. The next one is no wall up on the windows, and this is one of the hardest ones. And I'll admit, I still need to bird proof a few of my windows at home. But windows can be very reflective, and birds don't have the ability to know that that's a window. They just see the reflection and think that they're able to just fly right into that tree that they see on the reflection there. And so putting up window clings or window images is really a good idea, especially around your bird feeding areas. Now, they actually make bird tape. It's called bird tape, and it's a bunch of little dots that you can put right along your window. There are a lot of other solutions. We'll share some in our resources, or possibly in some links in the comments below or in the details below this if you're watching a recording. But there are many different things out there, and the goal really is to just break up some of that reflectivity so that your birds are not running into your windows. Next, pass on the pesticides. Well, a lot of folks use different chemicals on their lawns. That is almost somewhat necessary because lawns are not native grass, and you're trying to force a crop to grow that really doesn't want to grow in a lot of areas. And so it can require a lot of chemicals. But if at all possible, pass on the pesticides, and especially insecticides. So insecticides, or things that kill bugs, are really taking out the bottom of our food chain. And right now, there's some really scary studies showing that we're losing insect species and overall insect numbers at alarming rates because of the massive amount of pesticide use, insecticides that we're using. Even if they are claimed that they break down, they're still going to be taking away that food source for birds. And furthermore, they may accumulate and move up the food chain. So pass on the pesticides. And if you're using fertilizers, really just make sure you're using them properly. The vast majority of folks over apply fertilizer, and then that can cause big issues for waterways and eutrophication and other problems too. All right, and last but not least is no go on the night glow. This one is not too complicated. It's just basically turn your lights off at night. And you would think that we all turn off the lights at night, right? I can't remember how many times my dad said, turn off those lights when you leave the room. But outdoor lights are an exception for some reason. And even me up here in the rural UP, people are just very afraid of the dark. So they leave their lights on all night. But switch over to an automated timer or a motion sensor light, or just flip the light switch on and off when you go in and out, because there's no need to light up the night sky when you're not there. And the lights at night can cause disruptions to bird migration. Not only that, it can also cause a lot of insects to mass around your lights all night, which means a big mess for you in the morning. And some of those insects will die and they will no longer be food for birds. So don't mess up their migration. Don't kill all the extra bugs. No go on the night glow. All right. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Cindy right on time to talk a little bit about backyards and some more stuff that you can do to help the birds.
Elliot had shown you pictures of a house that had some things in it that we want to think about when we're setting up our backyards. This is the elements of a bird-friendly yard. I will be sending this out to you so you'll be able to look at it more closely. But we do want to point out, this looks like a really good yard for birds. You'll note over here, they say there's snags. This is a dead tree or a stump, and you leave it so that the birds, especially the woodpeckers, will come in. That's always really nice. With the vines right here, if you have the room for something like that, that can add for a nice nesting area. Shrubs are cover for the birds when they're looking for something safe. They might have berries. They might offer different attract insects with that way. Wildflowers, different grasses, and we're not talking about the typical Kentucky bluegrass on this one, but different grasses like this can attract insects. Of course, you have regular canopy trees, very important for different birds. Birds all feed at different levels in our ecosphere here. So there'll be birds who only feed up top of the trees. They're going to be the ones that are up there gleaning the insects. There'll be some that'll be down on the ground. And so it's really important that you have different levels of things to draw the birds in. Ground cover is really good. Of course, water, if you can provide it, is really good as long as it's moving water. Or it's water that you clean out regularly. You don't want to have stagnant water because that's just a mosquito breeding ground. And of course, nectar plants. I did want to just show you that if you're thinking about adding plants to your own yard, just remember that it takes time for a garden to grow. This bird-friendly yard that we saw, that took some years for that to develop. This actually is my own house, and you'll note that in the picture on the left, we tore out all the old-fashioned shrubbery, and I had this great idea that we're going to plant this beautiful garden, and we got this all planted professionally, actually, because I didn't know anything about plants. And I was so disappointed because it didn't look like much. It takes time for a garden to grow. When you're planning for flower diversity, which is really important. So if you think about it, if you just plant one kind of flower, that's that's still going to be nice, but it isn't necessarily going to bring in the diversity of insects or the diversity of birds that you want. It's really important to plan for your flower diversity. And what I mean by that is flowers that are going to bloom at different points of the year. If everything just blooms in the spring, you're not offering anything later on for the birds or the insects. If everything just blooms in the summer, there's seasons on both sides of that. And so you really want to make a plan, because not everything, when you go to Horrocks or you go to your garden store, Horrocks is our garden store here in Lansing, not everything is going to be showy at the same time. And if you're new to putting in a garden, of course, we want the stuff that's pretty, so we always go for what's in bloom, but that might not be giving your garden something later on to be in bloom. You want to incorporate those flowers that bloom at different times. This is a way that I have organized my garden. I went through and did an inventory. So if you already have some things that are in your yard, I did an inventory of what was in my yard, and I checked out online, just looked up the flower to find out when does it bloom in my area. And then I charted it all out so that I could see that I would have flowers blooming from March all the way through October and November. So it's really important to kind of look at that. And so you have your bulbs, which are going to be your daffodils and your tulips. I have a awesome plant that I'll tell you about. It's called Brunera, and it's a spring bloomer, but it's it's one of my favorite plants because it's deer resistant. We don't want it to be deer friendly. The coral bells are blooming out from April to July. Another one, this is like my only annual that I ever plant, which is called lantana, because that's a huge hummingbird and butterfly favorite. So you can see I've just tracked out when are my plants going to be in bloom. And that way I can make sure that I always have something blooming out. Here's my front of my yard now in spring on the left and fall. Up in this area, as you'll see here, these are New England asters, and these are just hugely popular with butterflies and bees. And then this is the other side of that front yard. The spring, this is Brunera right here, which the deer and the bunnies do not eat. So I have replaced all the hostas in my front yard with Brunera, that's a side tip. Also remember that gardens keep changing, and you should always look for opportunities for your backyard to change. These trees that are behind here, we had to have all of those removed. And that took my somewhat shady garden to a place where there's a lot more sun. This was the first year after that when I left the snags so that I could get woodpeckers in on here. And we expanded the garden because now all of a sudden we had more space. And that's just what it looked like after the first year. And then in subsequent years, you can see that it starts to really fill out. I have a lot of native plants. This is your gray coneflower, which is a native Michigan coneflower. I have coneflower, the pink that we always think about. This cool plant over here is called cup plant, and that's a really awesome plant for bringing in for birds. Butterfly weed in the front here. So those are also really good plants to have. But the real important part that I want to show is this graphic that just shows you our standard kind of American lawn. There's your diversity of species that you're going to see in there. Because they're probably using pesticides. They're probably not having a lot of different things to draw the animals in. Here we've got a little bit more with the flowers, so we're getting a better diversity. And up here, you can see that just by having different things all over, they've got some water, they've got vines, they've got all that stuff to get a much bigger diversity. So if you look at your own backyard, you might have a yard like this and you say, well, I don't necessarily want to have a yard like the one at the top. That's okay. Just start with some things that you can do to maybe bring a few more species into the area. So here's that native Michigan coneflower. This is the one that we normally think of whenever you see coneflower. This one down here was, I think, called, I don't know, maybe it was popcorn or something else. It was a cultivar. And here's the interesting thing here. I think it's really cool. That's why I have it in my yard. But it does not draw as many insects. Research has shown these cultivars like this has not bring in as many insects as what we see in the native plants. So that's just something to keep in mind when you are planting your plants. And then, of course, you also want to keep in mind, and again, this is why it's important to not just go to the garden store, stop and think, find your resources, because you can have plants that become invasive. They'll have plants that are non-native, and then we have plants that are aggressive. In some parts of the country, this is a butterfly bush. In some parts of the country, butterfly bush is considered invasive. There are people in Michigan who also consider it to be invasive because it will spread when it's in the right conditions. I know I have butterfly bush in my yard, so I'm not a purist. I love how it attracts butterflies, but I'm also very aware of making sure that it's not spreading around. This plant over here on the right is a very aggressive plant. This is a gooseneck loosestrife. And if you get something like this, it can take over your entire yard. So you want to be very careful to know what is the type of plant that I'm putting in my yard, because it depends on how much you want to work in your own yard too. If you have a small space or you don't necessarily want to put out a lot of plants, get a planter. You can put, this is lantana, by the way, which is an annual here in Michigan. Across the country, it's a perennial, but down south and out in Arizona and all it can grow is to be like a tree. In fact, this is a lantana tree that I bought, but it only lasts one season. This is an awesome plant, one of my favorites as an annual because it blooms from the minute you put it in the ground till the first frost. And it's a real hummingbird magnet too, which of course, hummingbirds are one of my favorite. So if you hang a potted plant outside, put a potted plant outside or put a hanging plant outside, that's how you can bring in the hummingbirds. Hummingbirds like red. We know that. They like bright colors and they're attracted to the tubular shaped things like this or in the trumpet vine. You don't want to forget about water. So here's just, we just make sure that we clean out our water features all the time and that we're changing the water because we sure don't want to have mosquitoes if we can help it, and keep the water fresh. One thing I do want to point out is an excellent resource for everybody is the MSU Extension website for gardening in Michigan. If you go to the main gardening in Michigan, and I will send you the link for all of this, they have the smart gardening section. They have a master gardener program, but they also do things like, hey, here's information on how to do your lawn better. Here's information on pollinators, trees and shrubs, fruit, flowers, and soils and compost, and even indoor gardening. So it's a fabulous resource to do some research on before you get ready to plant. That's just a close-up look of the different things. You can get a newsletter from them too, which is really good. The other really cool thing that we have at MSU Extension is the Ask Extension. And you can go on here and you can ask a question about just about anything, really. But I mean, I'm talking about gardening today. And you ask your question and someone in Extension will get back to you. You can even send them, if you got a plant that's not doing well, you can send them a picture of that plant. If you've got a question about your tree or something, you can send them the question and they will make sure to get back to you and maybe give you the answer you need or at least head you in the right direction on something like that. This is going to show you some of the my favorites for drawing in the bees, which are pollinators, of course, and anything that the bees like, the birds like too. So we've got the coneflower. This is that New England aster. Here's autumn joy sedum, which is one that probably people are familiar with. This is cardinal flower here. And this little blue one, this is a native bee balm. You might be familiar with bee balm if you've seen it in reds, but this is the native bee balm. Sunflowers, of course, every time we have what we call volunteers that come out of the sunflowers that we have in our bird feeder, we just let them grow in our yard. And then this is the butterfly weed, which is also milkweed.
Well, thanks, Cindy. And, one of the other resources we'll share, getting back to that natives, is with some videos from Doug Talamay. And if you haven't read any of his books, it's a really good inspiration. we don't want to make folks feel bad about having lawn, or just the reality of owning an American house where you have to keep certain standards up. But by switching to at least some native plants, or if you're able to all native plants, you can increase the biodiversity of your yard tenfold. One oak tree can have upwards of 500 species, not 500 individuals, but 500 species of moth and butterfly caterpillars that live in it. And you might be thinking to yourself, like, why do I want more bugs around? But those moths and caterpillars, those caterpillars turn into butterflies. They're beautiful, and they serve a very important role in your ecosystems, for birds and for mammals, and even for us. Each different bug plays a role in ecosystem services. And by having a diverse yard, you don't actually have more pest problems. You tend to have less because you bring in the predators, the predator bugs like praying mantis or dragonflies or other predatory bugs that are going to help control some of those pest populations, like mosquitoes and flies and things like that. I actually, I still have a lot of lawn in my own yard at home. I got kids and they want to play in that lawn, but I let that lawn be diverse. I probably have a good 7 or 8 different species of stuff, including bird's foot trefoil and other, which isn't exactly the best thing, but daisies and other little flowers. And so my yard is half flowers, and I don't think that's a problem to me. I think that makes it more beautiful. Plus, it provides a lot more habitat and a lot more diversity. So, native plantings if you can, and just diverse plantings like this. One thing we want to give you some time to do is really quick before we go here today. We're just about to get to our Q&A, but to write down a goal for your backyard habitat. If you have a pen and paper, or you've got your cell phone, or if it helps you to write in the chat, put down a goal that you have. What's one goal? Start small, right? I often get overwhelmed because there's always a bajillion things you can do, but you only have time for so much. So think about what's one realistic goal. Maybe it's just to put a pot out with butterfly weed in it, a potted plant, or a hanger of fuchsias for the hummingbirds. Maybe it's to replace a 1 by 1 square foot section of lawn with something different. It could be a small goal. But go ahead and take some time to think about what's your yard goal, and then we're going to start getting to the questions here.